strange times in late-night public transportation.
Last week I had the strangest public transportation encounter of my life. I work at a bar, thus get off work late. Sure, I could take an Uber or cab, but those add up pretty fast, so I try to take the subway if it's before midnight. Chicago public transportation is pretty great, reliable, convenient, relatively safe. But boy, things can get real weird after 11 p.m. This is mainly due to the trains running less frequently and less fortunate individuals, often drunk, congregating for warmth. I try to time it so I don't have to wait in a tunnel with limited exits with said people. On this night, however, the train was delayed 15 minutes. I mosey over and sit on a bench by a couple of normal-looking business dudes in suits, 'cause according to my inner dialogue, they will protect me. 10 minutes or so later, this 50-something dude, clearly homeless, shuffles down the platform. When I say shuffle, I mean like no lifting of the feet, moving them ridiculously quickly, but not gaining much distance. He does all this while whispering, "Fire, fire, fire, burn, burn, burn," on repeat, and shoving handfuls of a family-sized bag of Doritos into his mouth and around his face 'cause he keeps missing. That alone was strange, but then he comes to an abrupt stop right in front of our bench and directly faces me. I could reach out and touch him, not that I would. He stands there completely still, staring at the wall above my head with one of those large, creepy grins on his face for about 3 minutes. I'm trying my best to seem indifferent, headphones in and swiping things on my phone. The dudes next to me have stopped talking at this point and look at me, and I look at them with my help me eyes. One of the guys then says, "Hey man, you okay?" The homeless dude then quickly breaks his stillness and in almost robotic fashion whips his head and looks at the guy, still grinning. He then looks at me, grabs a large handful of Doritos, bops me on the head, and slowly crunches and smears the Doritos into my hair. After, he robotically turns and does his shuffle thing in the direction he came from. Both the business dudes and I sat there in utter shock of what just happened. We then awkwardly laughed, made small talk about it. I brushed the Doritos off my head. The train came 30 seconds later. Thank goodness. Still super unsettling nonetheless. So, Dorito Pyro homeless dude, let's not meet. Too long didn't read. Waiting for Subway at night and a homeless man smeared a handful of Doritos on my head.
Creep on the bus with his creep friend.
I've been reading this subreddit for a few months now and never thought I had anything to add, but I just remembered something I tried to bury away in my mind from a few years ago. To paint a picture, I'm a guy who loves having long hair, and when this happened I was not yet able to grow facial hair as well as I do now, so I was clean shaven and pretty much looked like I could be a girl due to some rather feminine features. I had just come out of university and got on the bus. There were only a few places free where nobody else was sitting, so I got to nearly the back of the bus and sat next to the window, just listening to music, minding my own business. Behind me in the back of the bus, there were two guys who looked like they might have been either homeless or did a job that made it so they had rather dirty clothing. I hadn't seen them when I came in because I tend not to look at people all that much. Social anxiety and just wanting to get home, really. They seemed to be a bit drunk, and that's kinda how the next bit came to be. About 9 minutes into the bus ride, I felt a tap on my shoulder, snapping me out of my staring out the window routine, and it was the guy sitting most towards the middle. I shall shorten him to DG for either dirty guy or drunk guy. DG. Hey there, can you break a tenner? Me. Sorry, I don't have any. DG. Whoa, that's not a voice I expected. Are you a guy or a girl? Me. Rather annoyed now. I'm a guy and sorry I can't help you. At this point, I put my headphones back on and went back to looking out the window, because this is where any normal, albeit rude, conversation would have ended. He leaned back to his seat and had a conversation with his friend, which was becoming increasingly loud before I felt another tap on my shoulder. I sigh and take off my headphones again. Me. Yes? DG. So, do you have a dick? Me. What? DG. Me and my friend just made a bet on if you have a dick or not. Can you take off your jeans? Me. What the fuck is wrong with you? At this point, the drunk, dirty guy had gotten up, whilst his friend was encouraging him, and blocked my way out of my seat. DG. Come on, just let us see. I'll share the money with you, alright? Me. Dude, leave me the fuck alone. I became aware of the fact that he was a lot taller and stronger than me, and of the fact that everyone else on the bus was trying to ignore my situation. He moved closer and put his hand on my chest and rather forcefully said, "Show me now." This reflexively caused me to shove him as hard as I could. This, due to his apparently drunken state, made him fall backwards as I quickly pushed past him. The bus had just stopped, so I got out whilst he was struggling to get to his feet. The bus pulled away and I saw him and his friend shouting and making gestures. I stood there shaking at the bus stop, waiting for the next bus for 10 minutes. Drunk, dirty guy with drunk friend. Let's not meet again. And a special thank you to the people on the bus who just acted like nothing was happening.
Never take sleeping pills on a plane.
After reading a post about a creepy encounter on a bus, I've decided to post this. I was a postgrad at the time and was traveling to London for an international workshop. I was super excited because it was my first international flight, and my super cool advisor was paying for my trip in full. It was an 11-hour flight, and I was seated between my advisor and some random guy. And because I was so excited, I couldn't sleep and decided to watch a movie. I'm super glad I did. Firstly, I have to state that my advisor, a woman, was in her early 40s and very good looking, which is not an excuse. She usually took sleeping pills while traveling so that she didn't arrive tired and stressed. As usual, she popped the pills early on, so an hour into our flight she was dead to the world and there was absolutely no way to wake her up. This day she was wearing a tank top, which was not particularly revealing, but a small bit of cleavage was visible. Right after she fell asleep, I noticed the guy next to me was staring at her cleavage. As I stated, she was pretty good looking, so a lot of people often glance her way. He noticed that I had seen him and glanced away, and I thought that was it. I started to watch a movie, but a few minutes later I caught him staring again. And not just a quick look, he was staring almost unblinkingly at her. I cleared my throat and he looked away again. Moments later, he was staring again. This time I turned to him and gave him the death stare. He kinda grinned and then turned around, and I thought he had gone to sleep. An hour later, I was starting to nod off when I woke up with a start to see the guy reaching across me. He wasn't touching her yet, but it was pretty obvious he intended to. I immediately slapped his hand and asked him what the hell he was doing. He didn't answer, and I assumed he didn't speak English. He was reading a French paper earlier. At that point, I was creeped out and couldn't sleep anyway. Despite the fact that I was super awake, the guy still tried to cop a feel 2 more times. The last time I grabbed his hand and twisted one of his fingers hard enough to get him to wince. Throughout, he continued to stare unblinkingly at her, and I had had enough. So eventually I ended up sitting with my whole body turned to him, glaring at him for the remaining 6 hours of the flight. Most of the time he continued to try and catch a glimpse of her, and when he saw me staring at him, would turn and look at the front again. Needless to say, it was the most uncomfortable flight I've ever been on. But luckily, after we landed, he disappeared into the crowd, never to be seen again. Edit. I did report the guy afterwards to security, but never got an update from the people I reported him to, so I have no idea what happened to him. It was an overnight flight, and after the lights were turned off, there were no flight attendants coming around. I would have reported him on the spot if they were close by. I didn't get up to fetch one because I didn't want to leave him alone with her. Plus, I'm a woman and would have had to literally climb over him to go get one. He never showed any interest in me. Lucky me. And he acted all normal after the lights came back on before we landed. Also, I did tell my advisor about the guy after I finally got her awake.
Excuse me. Excuse me. Excuse me.
Hello. This is my first time posting. This is my favorite sub, so I wanted to contribute. This story took place at a train station in a busy city in Asia. The train station is always crowded, as it is one of the few that connects to the underground trains. In the morning, it is outrageously packed with office workers rushing to get to their desks on time, including me. I was 25 years old at the time. Nothing out of the ordinary happened that day. I failed to wake up early, got stuck in the rush hour, and had to push through throngs of people to get to the fare gate. "Excuse me," a male voice said from behind me. I didn't pay attention. Every fiber of my being was focused on getting through the fare gate and making sure no one tried to cut in front of me. "Excuse me," the voice said again, louder. "Excuse me, excuse me, excuse me, excuse me, excuse me, excuse me." Okay, that dude's voice was practically in my ear now. I turned to see who the annoying guy was. A man in formal work attire stood facing me, a little too close, but I guess that couldn't be helped since it was crowded. Maybe he saw me drop something by accident. "Can you tell me how to get to Ekamai?" I remember giving him a weird look at first, because all he had to do was look at the station's map. One of the train stations was literally called Ekamai. This is not like Europe, where there are so many different train routes that the map looks confusing. We only have 2 routes that intersects at one station. I'm used to being asked for directions by strangers, though, so I smiled kindly and told him to go to Ekamai Station. When he continued to just stand there and stare at me, I pointed to the ticket booth behind him and told him to ask the staff there if he needed more details. Having done my good deed for the day, I went on my way and forgot about the whole incident. A couple of months went by, and as I waited to get through the fare gate in the morning as per usual, it happened again. "Excuse me," a male voice said from behind. "Excuse me, excuse me." This time I wasn't engrossed in my thoughts and turned towards the voice by instinct. "Can you tell me how to get to Ekamai?" I froze. A man in a formal office attire. I looked up into his face. He looked me straight in the eyes as he waited for my answer. I honestly couldn't tell if this was the same guy. I couldn't remember his face. I remembered he was plain looking, but that was it. Alarm bells went off in my head. Normal, intelligent people simply don't go about asking a dumb question like that all the time. I was sure it was the same guy. Maybe this was his pathetic attempt at talking to a girl. Since I didn't remember his face, maybe he also forgot my face and didn't realize he used the same line with me already. He was probably using this line on all the girls that are his type or looked similar to me. In any case, I was obviously wasting my time giving him a proper answer, so I said, "Ask the ticket office," and quickly walked away. I forgot about him completely again. Then a few months passed. The third time it happened, I simply walked away without saying anything. More months passed. The fourth time was when I finally remembered the man's stupid face and already knew what he was going to ask when I heard the word, "Excuse me," from behind. By this time, I made it a habit to ignore all "excuse me's" that were spoken to me from behind. "Excuse me," a voice said next to my ear. I ignored it, quite expertly now, I might add. I was deaf to anyone needing help from behind me. "Excuse me," the voice said again. Oh shit. Whenever there was more than one "excuse me," I knew it was the guy. I walked away faster, but before I could even think I was out of the clear, he tapped me on the shoulder. That triggered me. It was not okay to touch me. What the fuck? I rounded on him. "No, I don't know where Ekamai is," I said. To my surprise and confusion, it was a different guy this time. He was lanky and everything about him looked too angular. "Can I be your friend?" he asked. The way he said "friend" made it clear what kind of friend he meant, and that seemed to break my stupor. "Are you fucking kidding me?" I glared at the guy. I got stopped in my rush hour for this shit? Fucking weirdo. I had no time for this. Until this day, I still don't know what that was all about. I'm quite average looking, and my figure is considered thick by Asian girls' standards, as I'm not the thin and delicate type. I ran into the first weirdo a couple more times after this, but then it all stopped for about a year. I almost forgot about it and finally stopped jumping every time I heard "excuse me" from behind. In fact, I had relaxed so completely that today when I heard a voice say, "Excuse me," I didn't think anything of it. It said, "Excuse me," again. Yup, still relaxed, but still kept walking towards the train station. "Excuse me, excuse me." I guess that guy is in a hurry. Better get out of his way. I moved to one side of the sidewalk to let the dude pass. "Excuse me." A man in formal office attire ran up from behind me and cut me off. Yup, he's back. Edit. The last encounter with the "excuse me, how do I get to Ekamai" man made it the 7th time. Everyone in the story is local, so no foreigner element here. Thank you everyone for your ideas and support.
Follow your gut. Don't stop the car.
This is my first time posting, so here goes nothing. So this happened about 10 years ago when I was a freshman in college and I had just started dating my boyfriend. He lived a few towns away from me at the time. We actually now live in a cute apartment not far from where this story takes place. And I was taking some of the back roads towards the parkway to get home. I had fallen asleep at his house while watching a movie, so it was about 3 a.m. and I was exhausted. I knew the way to the parkway well enough, but I was still not familiar with that particular part of town. As you get closer to the parkway, you have to actually cut through a park to get to the entrance ramp. That being said, there were very few lights and the nearest house wasn't far, but it was totally out of sight. I pull onto the short road and see a gold sedan stopped in the middle of the road. It was actually stopped in a way that it didn't matter which way you were traveling. It was going to be a squeeze to get around him. Just for a little background, I'm very small, and at the time I might have weighed 100 pounds, and I only stand at 5 feet tall. So I slow my car down and I'm trying to see if I can see headlights coming from the other direction so I can pull around him. But before I could make a move, this tall man runs around from the front of this stopped car and starts waving his arms to get my attention. As I mentioned, I'm small, young, alone, and it's 3 a.m. There was no way I was going to stop for this guy. He didn't look worried. He didn't even look that scary, but an alarm went off in my head that something wasn't right. I tried to inch up so that I could pass him, but he stands in front of my car and is not going to let me pass. I quickly lock my car doors, which became a habit after this, and stopped. He starts trying to talk to me, and he's now making his way over to my window. My hearing isn't very good, but he was so close to me that I could read his lips, and he was asking me for help. He wanted my cell phone to call someone. I said that I was very sorry, but no. He had his hand on my window. Please. I said no again and didn't care if I ran over his foot. I just left. I was starting to get scared. I was able to just barely pass, but had to do so on the oncoming traffic lane. I look in my mirror and he's just standing in the middle of the road, staring at me. I could see the anger on his face in my brake lights. I pull back into the right lane, and as I did, my headlights catch 3 men climbing out of the bushes. They were all dressed in the same black t-shirts and jeans, and they were all glaring at me. I could almost feel the anger radiating off of them. I gunned it and flew up the road and onto the parkway. I could feel my whole body shaking. What had just happened? What were they going to do if I had stopped? I pulled out my phone and called the police. They had to transfer me a few times because no one could figure out if I should be talking to the county police or highway patrol. It was basically at the parkway entrance and no one wanted to deal with me. When I was finally able to tell someone what had happened, they sent a car over to check it out. I had asked the officer to call me back and let me know if they found them, since I drive over there a lot. He later told me that by the time they got there, the men and car were gone. But not even 5 minutes after they spoke to me, another woman called in, had the same stories as me, in that same location. I was advised not to drive over by the park at night anymore. I had no idea that it was not safe at the time, and have never taken that exit at night since. When I told my parents, my mom cried and my dad was crazy angry, but they were both proud of me for not stopping. There was also a new rule instituted in our family, boyfriend included, that we had to text someone when we were on our way home. So, scary guys at the park, let's not meet.